हेलो 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 नमस्कार दोस्तों, मैं हूं आपका मित्र विवेक बजाज, को फाउंडर स्टॉकेज और इलन मार्केट्स का। दोस्तों, एक और फेस टू फेस और इस बार इन्वेस्टमेंट ओरिएंटेड चर्चा करेंगे। फेस टू फेस इन्वेस्टिंग। दोस्तों, आई हैव रिकॉर्डेड फ्यू वीडियोस इन द पास्ट रिलेटेड टू इन्वेस्टमेंट। ट्रेडिंग तो आप जानते ही हैं कि मैं कंटिन्यूसली रिकॉर्ड करता रहता हूं। अच्छे ट्रेडर्स लोग को आपके सामने लेके आया हूं, उनके स्ट्रेटेजीज आपके साथ में शेयर किया है, एंड इट हैज बीन अ ग्रेट एक्सपीरियंस। इन्वेस्टिंग के अंदर में आई हैड some incredible guests who are really good investors in the market for a couple of years and have done very good। तो मुझे लगा वो इन्वेस्टिंग वाला कार्यक्रम वापस से कंटिन्यू किया जाए। तो इस बार क्या किया मैंने, इस बार आई वॉज एबल टू आइडेंटिफाई पीपल हु बिलोंग टू अ पर्टिकुलर इंडस्ट्री, और उस इंडस्ट्री को वो बहुत अच्छे से समझते हैं। तो मैंने उनको रिक्वेस्ट किया, एंड आई एम गोइंग टू स्टार्ट ऑफ दिस विद द गेस्ट टुडे। मैंने उनको रिक्वेस्ट किया कि आप क्योंकि उस इंडस्ट्री में काम किए हुए हैं, आपसे ज्यादा वो इंडस्ट्री को कोई और नहीं समझता है, तो प्लीज आप आइए और उस इंडस्ट्री के बारे में हम सबको समझाइए। तो आज ये फेस टू फेस में मैं वो प्रोसेस को किक स्टार्ट कर रहा हूं। सो चलिए चालू करते हैं इस फेस टू फेस इन्वेस्टिंग सीरीज, जिसमें इंडस्ट्री के लोगों से बात करेंगे उस इंडस्ट्री के बारे में और उनसे सीखेंगे ए टू जेड ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर इंडस्ट्री। चालू करते हैं। पहला इंडस्ट्री जो कि सबसे कॉम्प्लिकेटेड इंडस्ट्री है, वो है बैंकिंग और एनबीएफसी। तो आज जो मेरे गेस्ट हैं वो बैंकर रहे हुए हैं और काफी अच्छा रिच नॉलेज है उनको बैंकिंग इंडस्ट्री का। तो मैं इनवाइट करूंगा अरविंद दत्ता।
You're doing?
हेलो अरविंद जी, कैसे हैं?
I'm good, Vivek. Thank you so much for inviting me.
थैंक यू सो मच, इट्स माय प्लेजर दैट यू accepted this, and you are sharing your rich knowledge with our learners, so it's great feeling for me.
It's a mutual pleasure, I would say, and it's an opportunity to talk to you and to talk about banking and what exactly is the roadmap ahead for banking in India. And I think it'll be a good learning experience for me as well.
Wow, fantastic. So Arvind ji, the way we start is we should know about you. As I said, you have been a banker, but थोड़ा और आपका experience के बारे में पता लग जाए तो people will have more clarity about you, and then we'll go to the presentation and the concept discussions.
So I've been a banker for more than 24 years in my career, and 2019 I decided to give up banking and kind of get into retirement mode. The way I have seen banking is I worked with NBFCs and banks both together. Started off with my career in an NBFC called Magma FinCorp. Then I moved to NBFC 20th Century Finance, which was the promoter of Centurion Bank.
Okay.
20th Century had a reverse merger into Centurion Bank in about 99 2000, and
Mm-hmm.
from Centurion I moved to HDFC Bank in the credit side, and from there on I got an opportunity to work for Citigroup in India. From Citigroup, it was when I was in Citigroup, I got an opportunity to move to UAE to understand banking in the Middle East, basically. So I stayed in Dubai for almost 11 years. I have worked there for two banks uh, in various assignments from risk to credit to collections, all on the retail banking side. So in 2019, I decided to come back to India to take care of my mother because my mother stayed in India alone, and she is now 81 plus. So no one was there to take care of her. So I decided to give up my job and return to basically to India in 29. And for the last 2 years, I've been consulting with quite a few banks and some of the consultancy companies, basically.
Wow, fantastic. It's such a pleasure and honor to know you and your experience, and the fact that you are here in India for a specific purpose. It's incredible. So thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. But
Thank
tell me, Arvind ji, banking, and you have lived banking for years now. How has banking changed? We are going to talk about the concepts later, but how has the banking changed in last 20 years since you have seen the banking sector?
So if you look at the last 30, 40 years, the banks have undergone a complete change basically. Uh, there was a time where we had only the public sector banks, or some of the old generation private sector banks. So in 1992-93, RBI first called for applications for private banks, and they gave out 10 licenses to new private sector banks, out of which hardly four, probably four or five remain today, and rest have all merged basically with other banks. And secondly, when you look at it, the other thing that's driven banking is it was all about corporate lending to companies to set up large factories, to set up large projects or infrastructure projects, etc. And today it's shifted towards retail or consumption basically. So what has happened is that today there is a large section of the population which is consuming banking services, which is driving the growth of banking in India. And secondly, the delivery model is shifting from a branch-led delivery model to more towards the online digital mobile banking app side basically. So
Right.
that is the transformation that banking is going through, and technology is playing a very big role in this. We remember that when I was a kid or I had a bank account, there used to be so much of ledgers that the bank branches used to maintain. And today it's all seamless. It's all on the core banking system of a bank. And secondly, everything is connected today. Whichever branch you walk in, wherever you have an account, doesn't matter. You can access your account, you can do all your transactions there and then. But earlier, you were only a customer of a branch, not of a bank. So this is how it has changed over the years, basically.
Very interesting. So let's get on with your presentation because I'm sure you will have lots to share in that presentation as well. So I'll make you the presenter.
So can you
I
see
can
my
see your
screen?
yes,
Okay.
I can see your screen. Yeah.
So basically, I'm going to talk about some bit of history of the banking sector in India and what
Mm,
are the growth and opportunities and what's driving this growth in the near future for the banks in India. To
yeah.
begin with, basically, if you look at it, the evolution of Indian banking sector. So in 1921, we had only one bank, which was the Imperial Bank of India, right?
Okay.
So then in 1935, the RBI was established as the central bank of the country. So the earlier role of RBI was managed by Imperial Bank of India. So it kind of gave that role back to RBI when it was established in 1935. Then between 1936 to 1955, Imperial Bank expanded its branches and it was renamed as State Bank of India. It had almost a network of 500 branches in the country. And then we saw a phase between mid 50s to 2000 where a lot of these private banks were nationalized by the government for credit delivery system and to expand into areas like tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And there were 14 large nationalized banks, which were large banks which were nationalized by the government. And it also saw the entry of private players in 92, 93, which brought in ICICI, HDFC, Axis Bank, etc., and IndusInd Bank. And then there was this gradual upgradation of technology, the core banking system coming into play, and all the banks migrating into core banking system. From
Right.
2000 onwards, it's more, and there was this interesting incident that happened in 2003, I think, where RBI gave the option of converting two NBFCs into a bank. One was Kotak Mahindra Finance and the other was Sundaram Finance. At that point in time, these were the two largest NBFCs and probably two of the most strongest NBFCs. And RBI gave them a choice that if they wanted, they could get a license to operate a bank. Kotak took the bait and kind of took the license. Sundaram continued being an NBFC. They were more comfortable being an NBFC than in a bank. And we know how it has panned out over the last 17, 18 years after this license that was issued to Kotak. So basically, then we look at in the current scenario, there has been a consolidation going on in the banking sector right now, right? So just give you a flavor on my next slide. Uh, RBI is the big boss or the big daddy that we call in banking. And then you have banks and financial institutions that are governed by RBI. So banks are scheduled commercial banks, there are public sector banks, and there are private sector foreign banks and payment banks and small finance banks. So this is the
Okay.
classification that RBI follows for banks, basically your scheduled commercial banks. Then there are the cooperative credit institutions like the regional rural banks or the local area banks, basically. Those also now come under RBI. And you have the financial institutions like the SIDBI, the NABARD, etc., which are focused institutions to a particular sector or to a particular space. And then you have the state level institutions and other institutions which come under it, basically.
Okay. Arvindji, I'll keep on asking very trivial questions also in the middle.
Right.
Yeah, we talked about NBFC, and Sundaram continued to be an NBFC. Kotak became a bank.
Yeah.
This structure which you are discussing in this slide, it doesn't have NBFC, right?
No, NBFCs I haven't put in this slide, but there are a whole lot of NBFCs in India that operate in various areas, basically.
Right.
Some are
So
some are
what is the core difference between a bank and an NBFC?
So first of all, NBFC license is very easy to obtain. There are certain conditions that you fulfill on the net worth criteria, and you apply to RBI for a license, you can get it. But
Okay.
whereas for a bank, there are very stringent criteria that you need to have a minimum equity capital of at least 500 crores, etc. Then there are other conditions that RBI looks at, that you should not be part of a large corporate house. There has to be an arm's length that needs to be maintained between corporate houses and banks. So you will see that in India, none of the corporate houses owns any bank, but they have NBFCs, basically, and they have
Hmm.
aspirations to become a bank.
Hmm. Hmm.
So there is an entry barrier for a bank, whereas the regulations or the criteria, there are stringent measures that RBI applies, basically, to manage banks. There
Okay.
are so that's the basic difference, I would say, basically.
Otherwise, the core business is to borrow money at an interest rate and lend at a higher interest rate. Both the entities are supposed to do the same thing, right?
Yes, both do the same job. Basically, money is the raw material.
Hmm.
They take money from depositors or investors, etc., or borrow money, and they lend it at a differential pricing to earn a profit, basically.
Okay. Okay. I may have more questions related to this subject in future slides.
Okay, no worries.
Hmm.
So moving on from this sector, if you look at it in the last 20 years, the consolidation that's happened in Indian banking. So in 2000, there were almost 297 banks in India. But when you look at it in 2021, there are only 140 banks left now. So there has been a lot of consolidation. Some foreign banks would have left the country. Government has consolidated its large holding of public sector banks into 12 now, right? If you look
Hmm.
at the second box on the right, the second chart, it tells you that there are 12 public sector banks, which used to be probably 30, 40 few years ago.
Hmm. Hmm.
Today
Hmm.
we have 22 private sector banks. We have 44 foreign banks operating in the country. There are approximately 43 regional rural banks and 10 small finance banks that are there. And we
Hmm.
have 6 payment banks and 3 local area banks currently in India, basically. So that
Okay.
makes it up 140. Yeah.
Okay. So, Arvindji,
Yeah.
are we going to discuss in future slides about these payment banks, small finance banks, and what they can do and what they can't do?
I will take you through, basically. So the difference I can take you right now, basically, a public
Yeah.
sector or a private sector or a foreign bank are full commercial banks, basically. They
Hmm.
they can do any kind of lending, whether it's a corporate, whether it's a retail, whether it's a small loan, a large loan, etc.
Hmm.
But a small finance bank has certain criteria that it can only lend up to a certain level or to a loan amount that's restricted by RBI.
Hmm.
They can only give low ticket loans, basically, to a
Hmm.
certain threshold that RBI prescribes as per the license and regulatory requirements. A
Okay.
payment bank is only a bank that facilitates payments for customers between various entities basically. So they are not supposed to lend, etc. They can take deposits, they can kind of do other things, but they're not supposed to lend that money out. So they
Okay.
are facilitators of payments basically, that you see. And local area banks are basically that cater to a small area or a geographical area or a state, etc. That you basically take care of.
Okay, I have one small question. In small
Yeah,
finance bank, we have seen
yeah,
that a lot of listed small finance banks are there these days. So you
yes,
mentioned that in terms of lending, they have restriction in terms of cap that only this
yes,
much you can lend per customer. In
yeah.
terms of deposit also, is there any cap that you can't take more than this per customer as a savings account or recurring account?
Vivek, I don't have that information readily available with me. Probably there's no restriction on the deposit side, I think, but I can probably check and confirm to you.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry, I don't have the information right now on that,
That's
basically.
okay, sir. Not a problem at all. Yeah. Sorry, I'll keep on asking some stupid questions also. So no
No,
problem.
no,
Even
there's
if
no
you have no
question
answer.
is stupid. No question is stupid, I believe. You please ask and questions, and I'll try and clarify as much as possible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. So
Let's
moving
proceed.
on, so moving on to my next slide, which shows the growth of the Indian economy over the last 7-8 years. So if you look at it, inflation was very high during FY 2013, which has now moderated or almost half to around 5.5%, uh, given the current environment, but was very benign in the last 3-4 years.
Hmm.
If you look at the current account as a percentage of current account deficit as a percentage, we are currently comfortable because there's hardly any imports that are taking place, but it's always been negative for India. Current account
Hmm.
deficit, we are negative on that side. And
Hmm.
fiscal
Hmm.
deficit, basically when government spends more than what it earns on taxes, that's the fiscal deficit, and it's always been over budget that the government spends. So it's been in the range of 5 to 3% usually. And now the government is expanding to spend more to increase the fiscal deficit because the economy needs that kind of investments to kickstart after this COVID pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, the crude has been a very good factor for India, that it's helped us in our uh, payments, etc. Because we import almost 80-85% of our crude usage.
Hmm.
And it used to be very high, $100+, now around $60-65, been kind of hovering around in the last few months or last couple of quarters.
Hmm.
GDP growth, you see, it's a mixed bag. It's been going up, it's been going down, but last 2-3 years has been it's been drooping down. And we had at one point in time, India was the fastest growing economy probably 3 years ago. But now
Hmm.
we are in the red in the sense that we are having a negative GDP growth because of this impact of COVID that we are seeing. But
Hmm.
hopefully, in the next 6 to 9 months, we will again go back to the growth that we aspire to. And being a large country, the economy will kickstart again in the next 1 or 2 quarters.
Hmm.
Foreign
Hmm.
forex reserves are very comfortable at the moment, at the highest so far we've seen in India's history, basically. And INR has been kind of in the range of 70 to 74 rupees in the last 3-4 years. It's been kind of there, but usually INR depreciates by 1.5 to 2% every year. That's
Right.
what it's been in the last 70 years that we've seen. So this is
Right.
something on the numbers on the economy, basically.
So one
Uh,
thing in that slide,
yeah,
one question
yeah,
I have.
yeah,
The Forex reserve, it is at an all-time high, looks like in
yeah,
last
yeah,
10 years or so.
yeah.
Is it because our current account is surplus and we are not importing, so we are not paying anyone outside?
Yes, one reason is that there is a current account surplus. The imports have gone down drastically in the last 1 year.
Hmm.
Secondly, there is a lot of FII money that's come in the last 1 year. So
Hmm.
if you count the FII money that's coming into the markets because of surplus liquidity abroad, whether it's the
Hmm.
US Fed or the Europe or the Japanese central banks who've been kind of pumping liquidity in their economy. A lot of it is flowing into emerging markets, and India has been a beneficiary of that. Uh,
Right, right. So, one conceptual question,
yeah.
where does this forex reserve lies? Like, is it part of bank balance sheets? But if I have to
So,
see this money, where is it? If people have to see, where is it?
so this lies on the Reserve Bank of India's balance sheet,
Okay, okay.
right? So what happens is that when forex comes in, it comes through RBI. RBI
Hmm.
keeps those dollars and it gives the equal amount of INRs to the banks basically, because this forex
Okay.
reserves comes from various sources. One is NRIs making payments back home to India. Uh, then you have FIs that who kind of pump money into India for, and the
Hmm.
FDI that comes in through investments, etc.
Hmm.
Project financing, investments, etc. And then you have the uh, this is how basically the foreign forex reserves come in, and it's sit with Reserve Bank of India basically.
Okay, okay. Fair point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so should I move on to the next
Yes,
slide?
sir. Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, Arvind.
Yeah. So just giving you a flavor or a color on the last 20 years, how the bank deposits have moved over the last 21 years. If you look at it in 2020 March, year ending March 2020, the total deposits that all the banks put together had around 8,51,000 crores, right?
Hmm.
Today that figure is 149 lakh uh, crores basically,
My
right?
God.
Yeah. So if you look at it, the growth in 21 years, it's almost at a CAGR of 14.6%. Look at the size of the banks today, where they have moved in terms of the deposits that they hold from investors or their customers,
Hmm.
right? And similarly, if you look at it, this money that comes in as deposit has to go into lending, because banks,
Hmm.
for banks, the money is a raw material. They can't just sit on deposits and pay depositors but don't make money on it. So they lent out, and look at the credit growth, it's been higher than deposit growth. So
Hmm.
almost
Hmm.
from 4,54,000 crores to today, 107 lakh crores is the total loan book that all banks put together in India hold basically. And this has
Hmm.
been a growth of 16% plus CAGR in the last 21 years. So you see the bank credit has grown more than the deposit growth.
Arvindji, do you think this deposit growth which has happened in the banking system
Yeah.
is also moving off money from informal channels in economy to a more formal channel of banking system?
Yes, to a certain extent, yes, it's there, because a lot of these mainstream banks are setting up rural branches, right?
Hmm.
If you look at it, the government had that Jan Dhan Yojana, where a lot of these zero balance accounts they had opened in rural areas, where they
Hmm.
are transferring direct subsidy into those accounts, or any stimulus money that they want to pay out to the poor guys or to the people in the rural areas. So what is
Hmm.
happening, or even if it's Manrega money, it goes directly into the account of the customer. So today you've
Hmm.
seen that rural is a very hot sector, in the sense that banks are rushing into the rural areas, because the growth they see in the rural areas is going to be far higher than what we've seen in the urban areas. The
Right.
coming few years, or coming few 5 to 10 years, will see the growth coming from the rural areas. One, agriculture is doing well. Secondly,
Hmm.
the aspirations of people in the rural areas are also very high, in terms of, as they move up on the income levels, they will be banking, they will be spending money, they will be accessing credit, be it two-wheelers, be it other lines of credit, etc., be it cars, be it tractors, finance, etc. So you will see that this rural will continue to drive the banking deposit and credit growth basically.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Fair point.
right. Yeah. So now I move on to, I just showed you the credit and deposit growth as a whole in the banking sector. But between that credit growth, what's driving the credit growth? It's the retail credit growth, right? That means people like you and me who are consuming loans like, or whether it is a car loan, whether it is a two-wheeler loan, whether someone wants to buy a Rolex on finance, someone wants to take a holiday abroad, he's taking a personal loan. Someone is buying a house or a mortgage, he takes a housing loan from the bank. So if you look at it, retail was very negligible in 2000. Hardly 51,000 crores of loans that retail were having. And today, if you look at it, like it's like 28 lakh crores, almost 28 lakh crores of loan book is constituted by retail customers. Uh, so everyone, as salaries have gone up, as aspirations have gone up, as purchasing power has gone up, people have bought homes through finance, taking a home loan. People have taken personal loans, taken vehicles on finance. They've taken education loans, gold loans, etc. So if you look at the graph on the right hand side, it tells you that today almost more than 50% of the loan book is constituted by home loans across all banks. So home loan has been the biggest driver of credit in India for retails. Just to give you an example, in 2000, 2001, home loans used to be around 2% of India's GDP, right? So today, when we look at the home loan, it's almost like 10, 11% of Indian GDP, right? So the market has expanded exponentially over the last 20 years. Same is the case with vehicle loans or personal loans. So it's all consumption driven. And I think the growth will continue in the next 5, 10 years if you look ahead, because India has a very large consuming population, right? As people graduate from college and universities and they get into a job, they will need a two-wheeler to commute to office. They will need a personal loan to set up the house, even if it's rented, and they have to kind of put the furniture there, or have to buy appliances, etc. They will go out and get themselves finance these gadgets, etc., be it mobile phones. Then as you progress in life and your salary goes up, you need to kind of buy a car. 80-85% of the cars today get financed, right? So this is how a person moves up the value chain, I would say. And as he kind of settles down in life and he marries, he probably looks at to buy a house, that at least he should have a house of his own or a flat of his own. So that is what is going to drive the consumption theme or the retail loan theme in India in the coming years.
Okay, fair point.
If you look at the credit growth of retail loans, it's been 21% year on year, a CAGR of 21% in the last 21 years.
So you think a similar kind of a percentage is possible in coming 5 years?
So very difficult to guess that whether it will be 21% or higher, but probably my sense is that it will be in high teens, if not in 20s, basically.
Okay, fair point.
Right. So just to the table that you saw on the last slide, this is just the numbers that I'm showing you, that from 18,500 crores to a book of today, 114 lakh crores basically. So see the growth in home loans that you see, the personal loan component, and other probably were very negligible. I couldn't even get data from RBI site. Right, you had only consumer durables, which was 2,700 crores, 8,100 crores, which is now 7,242. So you look at the growth that each and every product today has seen in the last 20 years.
Right. I'm actually
Right?
quite surprised to see loan against shares and bond only 4,300 crores.
Uh,
That's actually quite less according to me, because what a significant amount of capital is invested in equities and bonds, and people are not leveraging that capital.
I agree with you that it's lower, but I think there are restrictions on this, that a bank should not have a certain percentage of a loan book more than that threshold in loan against shares and bonds.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Now go ahead.
So, so,
Yeah.
so if banks cannot go aggressive and say that no, only we will only lend against loans and shares. So RBI has a cap on that percentage, that how much of a loan book can be in your loan against shares and bonds, basically. So
Right.
that is why this figure looks low, basically.
Acha, and the other thing is this gold loan.
Yeah,
56,000 crore is gold loan. So
yeah.
technically, this is basically 56,000 worth of collateral of gold lying with the banks.
No, the collateral could be much more. This is the loan outstanding of a customer, of the
Okay.
customers that have availed gold loans. See what happens
Okay.
in a gold loan, it's one of the safest products to lend, right? If you look at it, if I own certain amount of jewelry and I need a loan which is fairly quick, I take the jewelry to a gold loan bank saying that I need money against it. The bank just kind of verifies the gold, looks at it purity, they value the gold, and they say we'll give you 75% of the loan amount quickly, right?
Okay.
I may need
Hmm.
75%, I may need 25%, I may need 50% against that, depends on what is my need, right?
Yeah.
But let's say
Right.
if I have a necklace which is 2 lakhs, worth 2 lakh rupees,
Hmm.
and I don't need a 1,50,000 which is 75% of the value of that necklace, but I say I
Hmm.
only need 50,000 or 1 lakh. I will not cut the necklace into two parts and give it to the bank, so here is 1 lakh and give me against this 50,000. I will have
Hmm.
to keep the entire collateral with the bank, which is three times or four times or even twice what I need the money for. So
Hmm.
this doesn't show the real value of the collateral.
Amazing. What a beautiful business that is.
Yes.
And with gold prices, if they go up, all the gold loan companies, I mean, most reasonable risk-free lending.
Yes, so if you look at historically, the gold loan financing was done mostly by NBFCs,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And there are only hardly two in the listed space that do gold loan financing. Their
Yeah.
NPAs have never been more than 1% if you look at it, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
people have that love for their jewelry because it's been probably passed on from ancestors at times. And
Hmm.
also, Indians have a love for gold. So they
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
want to forego that gold. They will take a loan when there's an emergency, but they will also pay it off and recover that collateral from the lender, basically. So
Okay.
gold loans is a very, very safe business. You are allowed only to lend 75% of the value of the gold, and unless until the gold prices fluctuate more than 25%, you are
Hmm.
pretty safe on that loan.
Okay. Talking about credit card also, 1,16,000 crore worth of outstanding balance is there on credit cards of people who are holding credit card, right?
Yes.
And bank is getting interest on this full amount?
So part of it is revolvers, because when
Okay.
you report to our all when banks report the data to RBI on a particular date, there is a card outstanding that they report. They don't report that these many people are revolving or paying interest. So what
Hmm.
happens is that, let's say the amount would have been billed or outstanding to the customer but not billed as well. Some would
Hmm.
have been billed but not paid, in the sense because you get 21 days to between the billing cycle, from the date of billing to the date of payment. There's a gap of 21 days usually that you have. So
Hmm.
some
Hmm.
amount of it would be by transactors, that they will pay this money back to before the due date, and there'll be new purchases that will come in. So this figure will have certain amount of revolver customers as well as transactor customers. So this is
Okay.
not the only outstanding that earns interest on the bank, but this is one of the spaces that then the next 5 years or next 7 to 8 years will see the highest growth. Because today, if you look at it, credit cards as a whole, there are only 6.5 crore credit card holders in India, or 6.5 crore credit cards have been issued by banks. So look at
Huh.
the population, that we've got 135 to 140 crores of population. 6.5 crores is a very low amount, or low number for credit cards that have been issued basically in the country. So this should see exponential growth in the coming years.
And this 6.5 crore is also not unique. So, like for example, I am holding three. So on an
Yeah.
average, a person is holding 3 credit cards. So unique people will not be more than 2 crores, right?
Yeah, so if you take a ballpark number of between 2 to 3 credit cards per person, so the
Hmm.
number could be around 2.5 to 3 crores that the customers that hold a credit card in India. So the
Yeah.
opportunity size is large, basically, and this is where the next set of growth will come, basically, that you will see.
Any specific listed company which you think has potential in this segment?
See, credit card business is hosted usually within the bank's retail banking operations. Like you have an
Okay.
HDFC and ICICI and Axis. They have their
Hmm.
credit card businesses housed under retail finance, a retail
Hmm.
consumer business. But the only listed company that has a separate credit card business is SBI Cards, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So SBI Cards in 1998 decided to hive off their card business in a joint venture with GE Capital.
Hmm.
So they kind of took out the cards business and they started as a joint venture, which has grown today to be the number two cards issuer in the country today. So the
Hmm.
only listed entity that you have today is like in US, you have hardly 2 or 3 companies which are listed standalone credit card issuers. One is American Express, second is Capital One, and probably the third one is Discover Cards.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Fair enough, sir. Let's continue.
So this is a slide from a report by CRISIL that was issued in 2019. It shows that how retail loan growth has kind of outpaced some of the large economies. So if you look at it in 5 years between 2013 and 2018, India's retail loan growth was 17% compared to China's 16%, and US is growing at probably at 2 or 3%, and some of the other large economies have a negative growth rate on the retail loans. So this
Hmm.
clearly shows the opportunity size that India has, and as we move along, as we grow, more and more people when they come into the mainstream and they get into the job market, this
Hmm.
retail loan growth will only continue upwards,
Hmm. 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 Fair enough.
right? So I am now moving on to showing you how the top six banks in the last decade have fared on their deposit and loan growth, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the big daddy of banks is SBI, which we know is almost 3 times the size of the next player, which is
Hmm.
HDFC Bank. So if you
Hmm.
look at it, SBI was 5 times the size of HDFC Bank in deposits.
Hmm.
SBI had a deposit base of 8 lakh crores versus HDFC, which had 1,67,000 crores of deposit, and ICICI was higher than HDFC Bank at that point in time. And there were Kotak and IndusInd, which was very small at that point in time, right?
Hmm.
Axis and HDFC Bank were just there between a gap of 15-20% between them in terms of the deposit base they had. So today,
Hmm.
if you look at it, the gap has really widened among some of the players. SBI continues to be the leader with like 35 lakh crores of deposits that they have with them from customers,
Hmm.
followed by HDFC Bank, which has 13 lakh crores of deposits.
Hmm.
But the size has reduced in the sense that which was 5x is now probably 2.5x or 3x
Hmm.
max,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Similarly, ICICI Bank is today fallen behind in terms of the deposits they have. They are at 9 lakh 32,000 crores, followed by Axis. So the gap between Axis and HDFC has widened almost
Hmm.
2x. HDFC is almost 2x of ICICI Axis Bank. And
Hmm.
Kotak and IndusInd have grown 10x if you look at it over the last 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
So if you look at the growth, the CAGR that they have done, SBI has been the lowest at 14%, and Kotak has been the highest at 25%, and others
Hmm.
have been between 14 and 25. So HDFC has done pretty well at 21%. Indus's has far outpaced HDFC at 23% growth, and
Hmm.
Axis and ICICI are at mid-teen levels CAGR growth in the deposits, basically.
Pretty much a reflection of the stock price growth, isn't it?
Yeah, you can say that. So
Sure, sir.
market kind of rewards you on performance, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. So moving on from this slide to the loan growth of the top six banks in the last decade that we've seen.
Hmm.
So SBI was 6,31,000 crores. ICICI was number two at 1,81,000 crores, and HDFC was number three at 1,25,000 crores. And look at Kotak and IndusInd, hardly 20,000 crores each, and Axis at 104,000 crores, basically.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
today, when you look at it in March 2021, the numbers for SBI are as of 9 months period, because they have not yet declared results. I think the results are coming in today. So we will have an
Yeah,
updated number later. What's the deposit and loan base? So
yeah,
uh, I sorry, I don't have the number basically for State Bank of India. I think the bar has somehow got erased.
yeah,
Today, SBI has 23 lakh 68,000 crores of loan book, which
yeah.
has had a growth of 13% over last 10 years.
Hmm.
Uh, the loan book of HDFC Bank stands at 11 lakh crores plus.
Hmm.
ICICI is 7 lakh 33,000 crores. Axis is 6 lakh 23,000 crores. So 1 lakh crores of difference between ICICI and Axis Bank. Kotak and IndusInd are neck and neck, 2 lakh 23,000 crores and 2 lakh 12,000. So Kotak and IndusInd have grown almost 10 to 11 times in the last 10 years, basically, if you look at it. So similarly, if you look at the CAGR growth, again, same story, what we saw in the deposit growth, that the highest CAGR growth in loans has been Kotak and IndusInd neck and neck, followed
Hmm.
by HDFC at 22%, and then you have Axis and uh, ICICI Bank around 18 and 14% respectively, and SBI has been a laggard at 13%, basically.
Hmm.
Though
Hmm. Hmm.
13% is also not a bad growth, I would say.
Yeah, considering the size.
Yeah, considering the size and scale of their operations.
Right.
Uh,
Right. But
so
this also includes consolidation of all the entities which was merged with State Bank, right?
Yeah, these are consolidated, this thing. So 2010 will not have the consolidated number. It would be only for
Yeah.
State Bank and its subsidiaries then. But today's number at 2021 would be all mergers that State Bank has had, basically. But those were subsidiary companies of SBI. So my guess
Okay.
is that number would include them as well.
Sure. Sure. All right.
Yeah. So going on to the hot area that we today see is one of the areas that banks are chasing is retail loan growth, right?
Hmm.
So how has
Hmm.
retail loan growth performed over the last 10 years? Just to give you a flavor that there was hardly 63,000 crores of retail loans that HDFC had in 2010, which is
Hmm.
today 8 lakh 31,000 crores. Oh,
My
sorry,
God.
5 lakh
Five.
27,000 crores. So 5,27,000 crores. So
Hmm.
it is, if you look at it, almost like nine times, 8.5 to 9 times of growth, basically nine that you've seen, right?
Right.
Uh, then you look at, uh, I don't have the retail loan numbers for SBI because I couldn't find it, the annual report anywhere in 2010. They
Hmm.
had
Hmm.
not segregated the number from corporate loans, so I have not included that. But today,
Okay.
SBI has around 8 lakh 31,000 crores as retail loans, which
Hmm.
constitutes all your products put together: home loans, vehicle loans, personal loans, gold loans, etc., all put
Hmm.
together.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if you look at ICICI Bank, from 79,000 crores to today 4 lakh 89,000 crores of retail loans that they have. Axis was a very small player. Their focus was never retail in the earlier times, but now they are also as aggressive as ICICI and HDFC on the retail side. So their book has grown probably 15x in the last 10 years at 3 lakh 34,000 crores. So aggressively, they've grown their retail book, basically. Once they experience that retail has lesser delinquencies and lesser loss rates, so they started focusing on retail growth. And as you look at it, Kotak was a very small player at 13,000 crores of loan book. Today it is at 1,41,000 crores of loan book on the retail side, and IndusInd from 8,300 crores to 1,21,000 crores of loan book on the retail side, basically. So look at the CAGR, it's been high 20s for most of the banks, including HDFC is like just about 21. But if you look at Axis, it's beaten all others in the retail loan book growth. And IndusInd again was one of the retail pioneers of retail loan in the last 10-12 years, since the time the management change happened in 2008. IndusInd was fairly aggressive in retail, and they built a good business out of retail. And Kotak again was a very retail focused bank, so 24% growth they've had over the last 10 years.
Based on your experience of both retail as well as corporate lending, which one has higher yield and which one has lesser NPA?
Okay, so corporate loans are lumpy. You have a large loan which could be from varying from 100 crore to probably 10,000 crore of loan to a single entity. So obviously, when you go on a large size, so you have to lend at a very low rate, in the sense that it's like when you buy one piece of a product, you have to pay a certain price. But this, if you're buying 1,000 pieces of the same product, you pay a lesser price. So the loan is priced accordingly, that corporate loans are priced lower than retail loans, and retail is spread across millions of customers, right? So what happens is that when I give 1,000 crore loans, if one loan goes bad, my 1,000 crore goes bad. But when I'm giving 1,000 crores spread across, let's say 1 lakh to each of these customers, not everyone can go bad at the same time. So my risk gets spread across many million customers in retail. So not everyone at the same time will go bad. Some people will lose jobs. Some people will not have intention to pay you back, so they will default. But more or less, not everyone at the same time defaults, right? So retail loans are smaller in size. They are spread across a large section of the population. They are priced higher, and they carry a lesser risk of default than a
Okay.
corporate
Okay.
than a corporate loan. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So shall I move on to my next slide?
Yes. Yes. One immediate question which is coming to mind, that typical spread
Yeah.
between yield from retail loan and corporate loan in
Yeah.
India.
Yeah. So basically, see, retail again. Sorry, let me first address the corporate question. Corporates are rated, right? So you have a rating that's given by a rating agency. There are AAA corporates. That's the best of the best, the cream de la cream that we know of. Then you have AA rated corporates, A, and then you have the Bs, etc. So
Right.
higher the credit rating, the lower the rate they will pay you, right?
Right.
So usually today, if you look at it, that a 10-year, the yield on a 10-year treasury paper or a 10-year government security is today around hovering around 6%, right?
Right.
Between 5.9 to 6.1 or 6.2, depending upon where the yields are fluctuating. So let's take an average of 6%. So a AAA corporate, if like Reliance, would probably borrow from a bank at 8.5%, right?
Okay.
They will not be willing to take a loan more than that, because there are banks which are more than happy to give to Reliance at that rate or even lower rate,
Okay.
right? But Reliance has a choice today. Instead of borrowing from India, can they go abroad and borrow where interest rates are almost zero,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So Reliance goes to a European bank or to an American bank and says that I need $2 billion of loan. Tell me, are you going to give me, and what pricing? So if he goes to, let's say, London, etc., so there's the LIBOR rate. That's usually the bank rate, equivalent of a bank rate. So if LIBOR is less than 1% or 0.5%, the banks will say, okay, 100 basis points over LIBOR. So Reliance
Okay.
gets that pricing of 1.5% on that loan, right?
Got it.
But the risk that Reliance carries is there is going to be an exchange rate risk, right?
Yeah.
What if the dollar or the pound or the euro were to kind of appreciate? or the rupee would depreciate. So Reliance will end up paying a higher loan amount back and higher interest cost.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Reliance has to hedge that risk by taking a forward cover. So
Yeah.
there is a
Yeah.
premium that they need to pay for that. So that premium again comes to a certain amount. So obviously the cost, let's say from 1.5, will probably go to 2.5 or 3.5%, depending upon what's the premium that's going around for that forward cover, right?
Correct. Correct.
So companies usually have a mix of foreign exchange and rupee borrowings. The treasury manages it there for them. Their treasuries manage it for them. So a triple for a double A corporate, the rates would be higher.
Hmm.
For single A rated corporates, the rates would be much higher. So accordingly, basically the risk gets priced in depending upon the credit rating of the corporate. But for a retail loan, the lowest is your home loan, because that's considered the safest. So if you today look at it, home loans are being priced aggressively. The lowest I think is between 6.7 to 6.9% that today the market is offering, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you look at it, State Bank of India or a HDFC Bank's cost of fund is 4.1%. They are more than happy to lend to a customer for 20 years for a home loan at 6.9%,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So as you move up the chain, the risk of the product increases, the rate also goes up. So after, let's say, your home loans, if you look at gold loans, State Bank of India kind of prices the gold loan at 8%, right? Some of the HDFC probably is at 9% to 10%. And then there are vehicle loans, which are car loans, etc. Those are probably at 9 to 11% today, depending upon which car, which bank, etc., depending upon what rack rates they offer. And
Hmm.
personal loans are higher, and two-wheelers are higher. Basically, two-wheelers are somewhere around 18 to 22%.
Okay. Okay.
Right. This is how banks price their products based on the risk of the asset.
Fair point.
Yeah.
Let's continue. Yeah.
So basically, I've shown you the loan growth, retail, and the overall for the banking sector and top 6 banks. So coming on to my last slide, which says that if, let's say, the GDP growth is X, and let's assume this X is 6% or 7%, the banking sector is very vital to the economy. So a bank, if the GDP growth rate is X, the credit growth can be 2X to 3X for well managed banks, right?
Okay.
So if you
Okay.
look at the credit growth of last 10 years for banks, they've grown at 16%, or last 20 years been 16%. So if you look at it, the GDP growth would have been in the region of 6 to 8%. So
Hmm.
credit growth was almost double of it. But if you look at individual banks, they've gone 3X of the GDP growth.
Right. Right.
So banks basically are a very good business to be in, for banks themselves and for investors as well, if you
Hmm.
understand the sector and go with solid names that have a history behind them,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
right? So I just wanted to take you to a couple of more slides on the debit and credit card spends, how they are growing basically.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at it, there were hardly any debit cards that were issued in 2012. So we had only 28 crore debit cards in circulation in
Hmm.
2012, right?
Hmm.
Today that number is almost like close to 90 crores, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's almost 3x of what it was. Similarly, if you look at the debit card spends on the second box on the right, the second chart on the right, uh, which is both your ATM and your POS together, put together, is has grown from 1,36,000 crores to 3,18,000 crores,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So debit card spends have been rising at 10%, though the growth of cards issuance has grown at 14%, right?
Hmm.
And if you look
Hmm.
at the credit cards, we were at around 1.8 crore credit cards in 2012. We are today at 6.2, 6.3 crore credit cards today in the system, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And credit card spends have virtually like grown 2.5 times of debit card spends, from 8,900 crores to today 60,000 crores. So the growth is really coming from credit card spends in India, which will continue in the near future as well for the next 5-10 years at least. You will see the credit card market just exploding as people kind of are more aware of credit cards, the reward points that they earn, and the features some of these credit cards offer. My guess is that credit cards will grow at the same pace in the coming years as well, and spends would obviously increase.
I have a quick conceptual question that how do banks make money from debit cards and credit cards?
Okay, so debit card, when you spend, there is an MDR, which is the merchant discount rate that the merchant pays to the bank, which is an X
Okay,
percentage of the value of the transaction,
okay,
right? So that money that whatever that fee that the bank earns, it is split between three parties, right? So let's assume HDFC Bank has issued me a debit card, and I'm using that debit card at the merchant who's got the machine installed by SBI,
okay, okay,
right? And my debit card could be either Visa, Mastercard, or RuPay. So
okay.
when I swipe that debit card or a credit card there, there is an interchange that goes to the bank, which gets split between the issuer, which is HDFC Bank in this case, for example, the POS provider, which is your SBI, who's put the machine to the merchant's
Mm.
shop,
Yeah.
and Visa and Mastercard get a cut on this because the transaction flows through the network of Visa and Mastercard.
Why do we need a network of Visa and MasterCard? Why can't banks have their own network?
It is virtually impossible to set up that network. It's a monopoly what Visa and Mastercard have set up over the last 50 years. Anywhere
Okay,
in the world you go and use the card, it will get accepted. But for a bank today to set up from scratch is virtually impossible. So if you look
okay,
at Visa and Mastercard share price, those are virtual monopolies.
okay, okay.
There is no
And
competition that they have.
what is RuPay?
RuPay is a Indian version of the network that Visa and Mastercard offer. Basically, it's offered
Mm.
by NCPI. So basically, within India and some places that RuPay has an arrangement, you can use that RuPay card, but you can't use the RuPay card on a, let's say, on a network of Visa and Mastercard internationally. So it's not
Got it.
acceptable internationally that openly today. Hardly very few countries accept RuPay, but your Visa and Mastercard are acceptable anywhere in the world, wherever you go.
Got it. Got it, sir.
Yeah.
Let's continue.
Okay. So basically, now I come to the point that how do you evaluate a bank's performance,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
In India, there are banks which are corporate banks. In India, there are banks which are retail banks, and there are also a mix of retail and corporate. Because every bank knows that retail is today is the fastest growing sector, so they can't be out of that opportunity that's available to them. So most banks are considered as retail, a mix of retail and corporate. Some banks have a higher exposure to retail, so it's classified more as a retail bank today. So one needs to check whether the bank is more focused towards retail or corporate, depending upon the size of the loan book composition,
Okay.
right? Then what you look at is that how the loan book has grown over the last 5 years. What has been the growth in the loans? What has been the growth on the retail side? What has been the growth on the corporate side? Right? Is the growth decent? 10%, 12%, 15%? What the bank has grown basically. Same way you look at your deposit growth. Deposits are very important because it's the raw material for a bank, right? So if I get my retail deposits from customers like you and me who go and put up a FD or put up money in savings or current accounts, that's basically the raw material that banks have to lend. Secondly, if they have more retail deposits, it's more granular and the cost of deposit goes down. So
Mm.
when a bank goes to, let's say, a corporate customer and says, give me 100 crore deposit or put 500 crores of deposit with me, they will always negotiate a rate, an interest rate
Mm.
that this is what I am looking at, and
Mm.
probably it raises the cost for the bank to take that deposit. So
Mm.
more retail deposits, the better it is for the bank in terms of the cost, and they are more stable basically for the bank.
Sure.
Then you have what is the net interest margin the bank earns on its lending. So if you read their quarterly statements or the press releases that they kind of make with their quarterly results or in the annual report, they specify what has been their NIM movement over the last 2 years or 3 years. And NIM is a combination of how much of retail and corporate lending they've done. So corporate reduces your NIM, corporate lending usually reduces the NIM, and retail lending, higher retail lending kind of increases the NIM. So there's a balance that the banks maintain. Some of the good banks are 4% plus in NIMs, like you have uh, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, and some of these banks. And most of the other banks are between 3 and 4%.
Okay.
Right. So as they kind of work on, and it also depends on your cost of funds. So if my cost of funds is a little higher, my NIM is going to be contracted because I'm competing to lend to a certain borrower with other banks, right? So I have to price my loan accordingly, and I can't go out of the market to price my loan just to increase my NIM. So it is also a function of your cost of deposits and the cost of funds that you have. So again, the fifth point talks about cost of deposits and cost of funds. The lower, the better, right? If you have the CASA ratio, which is the sixth point, that what is your current account and savings account composition as a percentage of the total deposits. So usually like there are banks which are at 40, 45%. There is one outlier which is at 60%. Right? Kotak today has large number of CASA deposits, and their CASA is 60. But also remember that higher the CASA or higher the deposits, it's also negative to a certain extent when the lending opportunity is not available to you. Like these
Yeah.
days, the banks are risk averse, or there is not much of credit growth that they want to go aggressive on the lending side. But deposit growth has been higher. People have not kind of gone out and spent money. They've not traveled on holidays. They've not spent money on vacations, etc., or other things that they probably do every year. So there is large number of money that's sitting in these savings account and current accounts, basically. So you are seeing that the CASA ratio has gone up for most of the banks in the last 1 year.
CASA ratio, I'm assuming it's current account, savings account, right?
Yes, current account and savings account balances as a composition of total deposits that you have in the bank.
Okay, got it. One question is that all the banks compulsorily
Yeah,
take money from retail
yeah,
then, and obviously corporates who want to give FD, etc.
yeah.
Can one bank borrow from the other bank also?
Yes. So there is a window that RBI allows for banks to borrow from each other. So let's say there is an overnight call rate that the market that exists, right? Our
Yeah.
overnight money market call money market that we call it. It exists between banks, right? So there are banks, there are mutual fund as well who can participate. So someone has an excess money or money lying with them, but they don't see that use, so they can lend it for overnight, which is 1 day, which is 2 days and 3 days. So this is very short term arrangement that we can get into with each bank, basically, or the banks
Okay.
get into among themselves. So the other thing is that if there is no opportunity to lend, but I have to pay a deposit of interest to my depositor, and the money is lying with me, it's of no use if I can't lend it. So I will kind of place that money to RBI,
Oh, okay.
right?
Okay.
So RBI pays me a certain amount of interest, which we call the reverse repo rate.
Oh, got it. Got it.
Okay. So when a bank borrows from RBI for a certain thing, so the RBI charges you a interest, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
which is called the repo rate. The bank
Okay.
has to pay. But it the
Hmm.
reverse, when banks kind of deposit money with RBI, they're also paid some interest, which is called the reverse repo rate.
Okay. 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 Got it.
Right.
Got it.
Moving on to point number 7. So cost to income ratio is very important. Cost to income ratio is that what is the cost of running the bank, right? So if there is a cost in terms of the salary cost, in terms of the branch network cost, in terms of your IT cost, etc., in terms of technology cost that the bank is undertaking. So there is whatever the total cost that the bank incurs is your, as a percentage of your total revenue, is your cost to income ratio, right?
Okay.
Lower the better. So good banks would be between 35 to 45, basically. So lower it is better that the costs are being managed pretty well, right? So
Okay.
your incremental revenue that the bank is earning is not kind of coming at a cost to the bank, and they are maintaining that cost. If a cost to income ratio is lower, it shows that. But there are certain bank, like one bank today is at around 79%, right?
Mhm.
So it has to work to get that cost to income ratio to probably below 70 or below 65 in the next 1 to 1.5 years, and then probably below 50%. And over the next 4 5 years, it has to kind of look at how does it go back to 40%, right?
Okay. Mhm.
Then you have to look at the gross and net NPS, because your profitability gets impacted by your bad loans, right?
Mm.
So bad loans is very critical to a bank, that if you mess up on lending, it can blow up on your face, right?
Mm.
Then you will have a tough time, and you will spend probably next 1 to 2 years to kind of repair your balance sheet and do good lending, and the bad loans will flow through and it will impact your profit. So we've
Mm.
seen in the last 4 5 years that corporate banks were going through a lot of pain, because a lot of
Mm.
these loans had gone bad for corporates. But now the corporate balance sheets have been repaired, and corporate NPAs have reduced. But the last 1 year, the retail side of the loan book has gone bad, in the sense that
Mm.
we are seeing uh, large number of NPAs coming from customers who've lost jobs, whose salaries have reduced, or probably who've kind of incurred expenses on healthcare for their family, etc. And they are
Mm.
not able to kind of sustain their installment payments,
Mm. Mm. Mm.
right? So NPS is something which is very critical. So one of the best banks in this sector has been HDFC Bank, right? They have
Mm.
managed their NPS whichever cycle they have been, whether it is uh, the corporate loan book cycle or the retail loan book cycle. Their NPS have always been in the range of between 1 and 1.5% on the gross side, and net has been less than 0.5%, right?
So what
Uh,
is the difference between gross and net?
So gross is the total NPS that the bank has, or total bad loans that have, the loans that have gone bad. And
Mm.
then there is an RBI mechanism or regulation that how much of if the loan goes bad, they have to provide a certain percentage of their profits to that NPA as a provision, right?
Okay.
So whatever is gross NPA minus provisions is your net NPA. So
Okay.
let me
Okay.
give you example that if 1,000 crores is my gross NPA, and I have provided 400 crores as provisions towards it, which is 40% provision coverage. So 600 crores will be my net NPA.
So that net NPA has to be removed from the profit that year itself, and provision will be carried forward in the balance sheet to next year's.
No, so net NPA, as it moves forward, every quarter they have to provide for. It can come back to, let's say, a current account that becomes current if the customer pays up all the pending installments, or if the
Yeah.
customer doesn't pay up, it can go to 4 months overdue, 5 months overdue. So after 6 months overdue, they have to provide 100% of the loan in
Okay.
retail, basically, right?
Okay.
For
Okay.
unsecured.
Got
This is how it works. So then if you look at point number 9, the growth has to be in revenue. Growth can either be through interest income or fee income, and fee income. So one has
it.
to
Mm.
look at how the interest income is moving and how the fee income is moving. What's the growth in those lines? So when you look at the quarterly results, they report separately interest income and fee income for the bank.
Mm.
So it's
Mm.
very easy for one to understand that where exactly is growth coming from, whether it's coming from interest income or fee income. So moving on to the provision coverage ratio, which I covered in brief on the point number 8. So as I told
Mm.
you that you have to provide provisions. So whatever provisions you hold, it becomes your provision coverage ratio as a percentage, right? If my bad loans are 1,000, and if my provisions is 600, so 60% provision coverage ratio I hold, basically. So
Okay.
higher the provision coverage, it's better for the bank that they don't have to then provide future profits towards provisions.
Okay.
So then the strength of the bank is known by the capital adequacy ratio, right? So capital adequacy ratio is that how much of a capital buffer they hold. Usually the norm is 9% as per Basel III guidelines, that minimum capital adequacy has to be 9%. Today, Indian banks are well capitalized, so they are as high as 17 to 20% as well.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So higher the capital adequacy, the stronger the bank is considered. Basically, it gives you kind of ability to manage any shocks that may see in your loan book. Basically, that you may see in your loan book.
So capital adequacy is equity plus profit made till date, basically net worth of the bank.
Yeah, net worth plus there is tier 1 and tier 2 capital as well, which are bonds that are issued basically to investors.
Okay. Okay.
That are also
So that
included.
so the capital adequacy would be that how much loan book you have, and certain percentage of
Versus
that
your
loan
capital.
book you have
Versus
to
the
maintain
capital
as a
that you
tier
have.
1, tier 2. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Okay.
So then if you are evaluating a bank, also look for the new customer acquisitions. Some banks report new customer acquisitions. Usually in the annual report, you see how many customers they have acquired over the year. So what is the growth in terms of the new customer acquisitions, which gives you a flavor that as the banks are expanding into new geographies, new areas, new cities or new markets, they are adding more and more customers. Obviously, these customers, when they come in, they will be sold various products, which can be debit cards, home loans, credit cards, etc. as well. When you open an account, you get a debit card, a checkbook, and a savings account. But over a period of time, you are sold many other products that the bank has.
Fair point.
Right. This was about how do you evaluate a bank's performance, and then I come to the case study that I have prepared for you.
One
Yeah.
question before the case
Yeah.
study. There's a
Yeah.
concept of SLR
Yeah.
in banking treasury. I know
Yeah.
that, I mean, if you go into the treasury operations, it could have one more
Yeah.
face-to-face. But just to touch, what is SLR? How much of the loan book a bank is supposed to keep as a reserve with the Reserve Bank? Can you explain SLR a bit?
Yeah, so there is basically two terms. One is SLR and one is CRR,
Right.
right? So when you SLR is your securities that you have to buy and hold, which are government securities that the bank has to invest and hold on its books, which is your GSECs, the government securities we call. It could be of 10-year maturity, 2-year maturity, or 5-year maturity, basically. So that minimum requirement that you need to hold, and SLR is your CRR is your cash reserve ratio, which you have to put with RBI. A certain amount of every deposit that you get, certain amount of money has to go into SLR and CRR.
Okay, so basically, if you get 100 rupees a deposit, say 5 rupees goes to RBI as a CRR, and 95 is left to you to lend.
No, so 95, there is a SLR requirement. So you have to buy the government security for a certain percentage of that deposit.
Okay, okay, okay.
Right. So maybe let's say 5% CRR, 5% SLR, then you're left with probably 90 to lend.
Okay, okay. Got it, got it.
Right.
And can bank also leverage their net worth to lend? That means they can borrow against their net worth and lend further?
So they have various sources of funding. One is obviously the deposits. Then you have these bonds that they issue, long-term bonds, etc., or perpetual bonds also, which come into tier 1 and tier 2 equity.
Okay, okay.
Right. So depending upon what their requirement is or what they feel is the best option for them, based on what this is going to cost for the bank, they take a call based on all this, and they may go for a bond issue. They may go to increase their retail deposits, or they may even go and borrow on a corporate side, or
Right,
as
right.
deposit basically.
So, Arvind, how frequently RBI looks at banking data? Is it daily or weekly or monthly
So,
reporting?
so there are quarterly reports that the bank has to submit. There are fortnightly reports that a bank has to submit to RBI on a regular basis, various parameters, and there are even monthly and quarterly reports that the bank has to submit, basically. So
Okay.
depending upon various reports, RBI has a timetable that every bank on a Friday needs to submit certain reports. It could be weekly, it could be some reports are fortnightly, some reports are even monthly and quarterly as well.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How has been your overall experience with RBI as a regulator for banking? Is it like very, very strict and banks are really very, very careful about reportings to RBI?
Yeah, so basically RBI auditors can poke into any bank at any point in time, right?
Okay.
And
Hmm.
when they walk in, it's like you have to, they're the like the police force. So whatever
Hmm.
they tell you to show, you have to show to them. You can't
Hmm.
say that no, come tomorrow, ya kal aana, ya parsu aana, aaj hum busy
Hmm.
hain. Doesn't
Hmm.
happen that way, right? Because RBI as a regulator has to kind of manage those banks, manage the risk in the economy as well. That if any bank goes bust, then obviously the depositors get impacted, and it
Hmm.
also kind of breaks the chain, right? It has a cascading effect on the economy and other banks as well, because every
Hmm.
bank today is interconnected, that in that sense, right? So RBI is very stringent when it comes to audits, etc., and they do a thorough job basically. And there have been certain misses, obviously, that no one is foolproof, but overall
Hmm.
they've done a pretty good job, I would say. But they can probably improve upon their audits from here on. May use more of technology, etc., to
Hmm.
kind of do audits. So RBI has to probably also change with the times, probably in coming years as well. Hopefully
Hmm.
they will do that as well. And
Hmm.
let's hope that India, the banking sector remains strong in India in the coming years as well.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Let's continue with the case study.
So my case study is upon ICICI Bank, how they kind of were on the verge of collapse, right?
Hmm.
This story relates from 1998 to 2008, right?
Hmm.
So RBI in 1998, ICICI Bank, ICICI Limited was the parent of ICICI Bank when the
Hmm.
license was issued in 1993 or 94. Then in somewhere in 97, 98, ICICI Limited, which was the project finance institution, reverse merged into the baby, which was ICICI Bank.
Right.
Right? So when the reverse merged into the bank, they kind of shortlisted retail banking or retail loan as the growth area for the next 10-15 years. They said
Hmm.
that India, the consumption is growing, retail is going to be the next driver of growth in the economy, and they
Hmm.
wanted to kind of ride that growth in the retail sector. So they
Hmm.
started aggressively offering all the retail products, from home loans to two-wheelers to auto loans to personal loans, consumer durable, etc. Right? They kind of aggressively tied up with manufacturers of car companies, of two-wheeler manufacturers. They kind of spread their network far and wide, and they went aggressive on the retail journey. So what
Hmm.
happened was that somewhere in between, for that hunger for growth, or the greed for growth, they kind of push the risk management book
Hmm.
aside, right?
Hmm.
They said
Hmm.
that this story is going to continue forever, and retail will not kind of default, as people will kind of, the incomes will rise, there will have more higher incomes, and they will kind of consume more. So retail will never have that kind of challenges what a corporate has. But in 2007-8, when the global financial crisis took shape, uh, the retail loan book got impacted badly, right?
Hmm.
Retail customers started to default on credit card, personal loans, auto loans, etc. So
Hmm.
suddenly you saw that default started to rise,
Hmm.
right? So ICICI at that point in time had around 67% of their 65% of their loan in 2007 was retail,
Oh my God, that's very
right?
aggressive.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And believe me, like kind of when I was a credit manager in a other bank, the competitor, and
Hmm.
the way they used to approve loans, I used to kind of feel afraid in the sense that the loans that they were giving out will turn bad in the coming months or coming years. And this is this anecdote I want to share with you, that we have these relationship managers who source personal loans, who source auto loans, and who source these two-wheeler loans for the bank. They are the relationship managers with these car dealers, like you have these Maruti dealers, your Hyundai dealers, or Tata dealers, or
Hmm.
Mercedes or other companies. So
Hmm.
when they used to source cases, sometimes these cases used to get rejected because the customer did not fulfill the credit criteria. So
Hmm.
there was these always these complaints from these relationship managers or sales managers to credit, saying that our cases get rejected, whereas the same case when it goes to ICICI Bank gets approved without any queries or any additional documents as well, right? So this used to be a very challenging time for sales and credit teams in the bank that I used to work for. A lot of fights used to take place. There used to be rising tempers that why our cases get rejected, whereas there are no rejections that happen in
Hmm.
ICICI Bank, right?
Hmm.
So just to
Hmm.
give you an example that what went wrong there, the risk structure in ICICI Bank was reporting into the sales structure.
Oh, ho, 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 ho.
Okay. Whereas
Yeah.
in the bank that I used to work for, which was number two at that point in time, the
Hmm.
risk was a separate vertical reporting into the CRO,
Hmm.
right? And the culture was very strict that if the credit team has said no, it was
Hmm.
very difficult to kind of for the sales guy to convince even the CRO to approve that case,
Hmm.
or even
Hmm.
the MD to basically say that please approve this case.
Hmm.
Right? But there in ICICI Bank, the culture was that if credit has rejected a case, the sales guy had the ability to influence the credit person and get the case approved. Because see, one obviously when the case gets rejected, the dealer is unhappy with the bank. It's because
Right.
he's losing out that sale. Secondly, the sales guy loses out on his incentive or commission, right?
Hmm.
So automatically the dealer says that why should I be sourcing business for you when my cases don't get approved or my sales don't happen. I a customer has walked into my showroom. I need to make a sale. I need to sell the car, and he doesn't
Hmm.
have the money to pay 100%. So the finance is required for the customer to take that car.
Hmm.
So automatically there was this liking for ICICI Bank by dealers that because everything gets approved, so dealers also started pushing junk into ICICI Bank,
Correct.
right? So somehow
Hmm.
they were not able to manage the risk management systems properly, whereas the number two bank was doing the right thing, making the right noises, following the risk management policies and regulations to kind of say that okay, this is what our risk appetite is, this is what we will approve, this is what we will not approve,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So just to give you an example, in 2002, in the car loans market, Delhi, I'm talking of Delhi car loans market, ICICI used to source business worth 200 crores of car loans in a month,
Okay.
right? The number two player was at 40 crores.
Oh.
Can you look at the difference that I can see today, that five times the size of the number two player?
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so that was the gap that there was at that point in time. And when the global financial crisis hit, it just blew up like a bomb in ICICI Bank, right?
So
So
this, so there is a learning that in case any bank is very aggressive, don't get excited. be conservative, look at them
Yeah,
in a
so
very different.
banking is all about conservativeness. If you look at what
Hmm.
Aditya Puri has always said, banking is no rocket science. You get in a
Hmm.
customer, take his deposit, you find a customer, give him a loan. But give a loan to a guy who pays you back. Ensure that,
Correct. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
In the meantime, you price your loan in such a manner that you are able to have that mark differential on it and you earn something on it, basically.
True. True.
Right?
But this was old ICICI Bank.
Yes, it was old
Yeah.
ICICI Bank. They had to stop their retail business for a couple of years. They had to
Hmm.
clean the mess, and then they started again after a hiatus of 2 years. So 2 साल
Hmm.
उन्होंने बंद रखा अपने बिजनेस को रिटेल का. उनको बहुत जबरदस्त हिट लेना पड़ा अपने लोन बुक में. एनपीएस शूट अप हो गए, प्रॉफिट्स बिल्कुल खत्म हो गए.
Hmm.
उसके बाद उन्होंने क्लीन अप करके they started again, and then they kind of were not that aggressive in retail.
Hmm.
And I think they have learned their lesson today in retail, and they are now doing the right thing, what is required from a shareholder point of view, from an
Hmm.
investor point of view.
Okay. Fair point.
So if you
Uh,
look at the number three news report on the right hand top side, HDFC Bank edges out as India's top private bank. So when
hmm.
when ICICI stopped business, the
Yeah.
dealers had no option but to go to HDFC.
Right. Right. Right.
Because आपका जो दरवाजा जब बंद हो गया मंदिर का आईसीआईसीआई का, तो आपको
Hmm.
दूसरे मंदिर में जाना पड़ा और वहां माथा टेकना पड़ा. वो एचडीएफसी था, तो एचडीएफसी ने फिर अपना रेट चार्ज किया. अब और यहाँ तक हो गया था कि देयर वाज नो प्रोसेसिंग फी बीइंग चार्ज उस पे. हर
Hmm.
लोन पे जीरो प्रोसेसिंग फी. सो एचडीएफसी बैंक व्हेन आईसीआईसीआई स्टॉप्ड बिजनेस, HDFC said we will charge 1.5% as processing fee. This is our rate that we lend to. Do you agree? So all the dealers had no choice but to agree.
Yeah.
So this
True.
was a case study that I thought is very relevant to the times that we are going through today. And again, after 12 years or 13 years, we are seeing a retail crisis today that's happening or unfolding in India because of the pandemic. A lot of lives lost, a lot of customers have lost jobs, a lot of customers have incurred so much of expenditure on healthcare. Their salaries probably have reduced, and they are fighting this issue that they probably will be unable to pay their installments on time in the coming months or in coming quarters.
Hmm. So, there was one bank which was emerging, and now it is trying to recover. Is Yes Bank, and Yes Bank was also supposed to. People were saying that it will become the next SDFC Bank or next ICICI Bank. What went wrong there, and how, as an investor in a banking stock, identify such kind of a issue in any bank? On the face everything looks good, but suddenly you have Yes Bank which just crashed with a normal investor not able to know what really happened in the bank.
Uh, Vivek, that's a very good question that you asked me, honestly. First disclosure, I lost a lot of money in Yes Bank. To be kind of making this disclosure that I was gung ho on the bank. I rided the story. I was in profits when it was the share price of 400, but at 15 or 16, I exited basically at a loss, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
what went wrong in a Yes Bank was the similar story, that the greed for growth, higher loan growth. They were kind of lending mostly to corporates, and till the time things were going right, they were making money. But
mm,
when you look at it after March 2020, when this whole crisis broke out, it was almost on the verge of bankruptcy, when RBI had to kind of bring in SBI and other banks to salvage it or to kind of rescue it. That time we got to know, as things unfolded, that a lot of frauds had taken place, right?
mm,
There was a pro that used to happen, that the promoter used to give a loan, and these companies used to invest in his family businesses,
mm,
right? So
mm,
as long as you've done wrong set of loans, they've gone
mm,
bad, you can still
mm.
recover. But if there's a fraud that has happened, then virtually there's not possible to recover that from that.
Yeah, right.
Right? if you look at DHFL also, it's a case of fraud today. ILFS, if you look at it in 2018, was a case clear cut of fraud.
Hmm.
There is a distinct distinction here. You can make bad loans and you can still recover from that mess.
Hmm.
It will take probably for you to recover a period of 1 to 2 years, but you can, but if you've done frauds etc while lending etc, then that mess is very impossible to solve, right? So what has happened in Yes Bank is there is a fraud that has happened there. And today when I kind of I was really kind of very positive on Yes Bank till about Jan Feb last year, and I had investments in Yes Bank stock. But when I saw that news coming out, I sold off my stock at a loss, because I didn't want to kind of continue, because I thought that this story is over for me. And for most investors, the story is actually over. If you look at it today, SBI and other banks have put in equity to rescue the bank, but as you look at it, their story looks highly impossible that it can turn around, right?
Yeah.
My personal advice to people is that don't ride that elephant today, because you never know which side it will sit, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
personally, it's very difficult to get out of this mess. They have kind of showing losses quarter on quarter. If losses increase, you need capital infusion all the time, right? So how long can capital infusion happen in a bank which is struggling? That's also a question. Who will put money as capital into that bank, right? When you don't see in the far off horizon that things will probably improve. Today it's probably at 12 to 14 rupees the stock price. I would advise people to go with a strong bank. Don't look at the share price of 12 rupees, but go with a strong bank that can grow and give you the returns. In next 2 years, can Yes Bank be profitable? The answer is yes and no both, but I don't know. But in 2 years, can HDFC give you a 40-50% return, or an ICICI or an Axis or Kotak give you 40? The answer is yes.
So, Arvind, you've been a banker, but you
Yeah,
still were not able to. I mean, you did your best, but you were not able
yeah,
to identify the problem with that bank. So,
yeah.
as an investor, what is your suggestion? What should be my strategy? Is diversification a good strategy where I say that, okay, I like SDFC, I like ICICI Bank, but anything is possible in any of those banks. So, I
Yeah.
probably should identify three banks or four banks together to invest. What is your way out to this problem?
Yeah, so again, it's a very valid question that you put. As an individual investor or a small investor, you can identify the top three banks and probably invest in that. Two could be your blue chip banks, and one could be one of those uh, dark horses that you think can do well. So part of it you can put it so it does well. Your investments grow multifold. Secondly, is that if you don't understand banking, you don't want to take a risk, invest in a nifty ETF, bank nifty
Oh,
ETF, right?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
thirdly could be that there are sectoral schemes in mutual funds, which are really good in that sense that they have done pretty well. If you look at the banking funds or the financial services fund of some of the mutual funds, that's
yeah.
also a good way to ride the banking sector or the financial
Okay,
services sector for
okay,
someone
okay.
who doesn't want to kind of bet on one particular or two or three particular banks, basically.
I think that's a fair suggestion. Uh, eh, do we have more slides? I'm actually becoming very
No,
selfish.
I am finished. The only thing that I want to end with is that ICICI and CRISIL into 2019 conducted a study on retail loans. They have come out with this thing that they believe that between 2019 and 2024, the retail loan books can double from here, or the business can double from here on. So the
Okay.
opportunity size is very large if you look at it. So banks who are good in retail, who have a good network, who have a good digital platform, will continue to add on customers.
Okay. So that's pretty fair point. So guys, look out for those banks, or you know that Bank Nifty ETF is also available, which is a very low cost solution to invest in basket of banking stocks. So you can actually select would you, Arvind, say that if India has to become a $5 trillion economy, which we will become, banks will still have to play a major role?
Vivek, let me give you one anecdotal evidence. Today, if you look at top global 100 banks, how many Indian banks figure in that list, right? There is only one Indian bank in the top global 100 bank, which is SBI, which is at 55th position,
Hmm.
right? And none of the other banks in India, that HDFC is large enough, Axis is large enough, or ICICI is large enough by Indian standards, but by global standards, they're very small. They don't
Hmm.
even figure in the top 100. They come somewhere in the top 500 banks
Hmm.
worldwide,
Hmm.
global banks. And just to give you an example, in the global top 100, which are the banks that form the global top 100? China has 18 banks, right? US has 12 banks in that global top 100. So if the economy has to be 5 trillion, you will have a HDFC and ICICI or Axis in that top 100 list in the coming 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So the runway is very large for banking in India. You just need to kind of stick to the best of the best banks and ride that journey with them.
Fair point. Fair point is absolutely logical. So, Arvind, this is all about banking, and I think this is the best premiere on banking which online internet will see. I'm sure that we will see a lot of people learning banking A to Z from this premiere. Thank you so much for giving this content. But I'm very selfish. So, अरविंद जी, मुझे आपसे एनबीएफसी पे भी चाहिए, अगर आप कभी भी आप समय निकाल पाए, बिकॉज वो एक सेगमेंट है जिस पे बहुत बात करनी है.
Sure, Vivek. We can have one session on NBFCs and even probably on insurance and AMCs as well, because that is the area, financial services is the area that is going to be growing multifold in coming years in India.
Absolutely.
We have not even scratched the bottom of the surface today in these areas, like whether it is AMCs or mutual funds or insurance sector or NBFCs, etc. The market size is very large, the opportunity again is very large, and whether it is a bank, whether it is an NBFC, whether it is a mutual fund or even an insurance company, be it a general or life, the opportunity they have and the growth they have ahead of him is tremendous. I would
So that
love to probably do a session with you on NBFC for sure.
and these financial services. So it's a bonus for me. मैंने एक मांगा, आपने दो का कमिटमेंट दे दिया है. So thank you so much, Arvind ji, for this kind gesture and recording this lovely video. I'm really, I don't have words to express the kind of clarity in the knowledge which you have given to me, and I'm sure my learners will appreciate that as well. Arvind ji, before we close, anything you'd like to say?
So I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to kind of talk to you and discuss about banking. And my endeavor is to kind of pass on the knowledge that I have so that more and more people can learn what I have kind of absorbed in the last 24-25 years as a banker. And it's been a great session with you. Thanks for the opportunity and really wonderful interacting with you. And you guys are doing a tremendous job when it comes to kind of sharing knowledge or educating your learners, basically. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Arvind ji. So, friends, Arvind ji is very active on Twitter also because he loves to share his knowledge and wisdom on Twitter. So, I will give you link of his Twitter handle below this video. So, please stay in touch with him, learn from him. What a lovely experience, vast experience he has. So, उसका फायदा उठाइए दोस्तों, क्योंकि बहुत कम लोग हैं जो इतना नॉलेज आराम से शेयर करते हैं और आप सबको एम्पावर करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. थैंक यू, अरविंद जी. See you
Thank
soon
you.
with NBFC video, probably very soon.
Sure. Thank you so much, Vivek. And it's been a pleasure. Stay safe, stay healthy. I know
Thank you.
you are a health freak. I look at your Twitter tweets that you go out for exercise and your things. That's really wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
All
Thank you,
right.
Arvind ji. Bye bye. Thank you. Bye bye.